Thank you, Kyle. Hello, everyone. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Kyle will be hitting the record button for this Zoom. And so this webinar will be recorded and will be available afterward. Just note that if you have any questions or comments, your video and audio and chat will be recorded. The CLE form for the presentation, as well as a copy of the presentation, will be provided after the webinar. And Francisca and I are asking that you hold your questions until the end. We have left time for questions. You can also drop your questions into the chat box, and we will get to those as we are able or in queue once we finish with the content of the presentation. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning of the new normal here. My name is Jason Wiener. I'm joined by my colleague, Francisca Pretorius. We are a Boulder, Denver-based boutique law firm focused on advising mission-driven social enterprises, small businesses, cooperatives, nonprofits, and others in distributed ownership and alternative financing. We are a B Corp certified public benefit corporation law firm. We have an office downtown Boulder as well as Denver, although nowadays we're all working remotely. Francisca is joining us from her home office in Massachusetts. We're a team of 7 attorneys and 1 paralegal with a variety of backgrounds and interests. And we have assembled the information for today's webinar to advise both clients and the broader community that we work with. There are a host of resources as well as up-to-date information about the content of this presentation on our blog. That can be found at www.jrwiener.com/blog. And Francisca can drop that link into the chat box here as well. We have a lot of material to cover, and so we ask that you bear with us through the material. Again, questions at the end or in the chat box, please. We will be quickly summarizing the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. This was the second piece of stimulus legislation passed on March 18th, 2020. This provided for certain employer benefits to employees. This is a little outside the scope of what we're presenting on today, but we want to mention it to give a full picture of what employer obligations are and are in effect as of April 1st. There is, I believe, another webinar hosted by the Boulder County Bar Association on this program later in the week. The lion's share of our time today will be spent on the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, passed just over a week ago. And this is what has been referred to as the largest stimulus package in US history, providing funds for nonprofit organizations, small and medium-sized businesses, large enterprises, freelance workers, and individuals. And we will be going through primarily the small and medium-sized business benefits. We will touch on tax-related matters, benefits for freelance workers, and we'll touch on the benefits available to nonprofit organizations as well. We'll segment the, I want to highlight which programs are available for which types of entities. So small business support, I think this is defined as an entity with fewer than 500 employees. The CARES Act really provided relief up to $350 billion for small business relief. There's a separate program in that act for large businesses. But for today, we're going to be focused on these programs for small business. The Paycheck Protection Program, sometimes referred to as the PPP, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Grant, the related SBA Express Bridge Loan, as well as some tax-related programs. These two go in some ways hand in hand. Some are flip sides of the same coin. So we will touch on how the different programs relate to one another. Again, the CARES Act provided for some of these programs to also include and apply to nonprofit organizations. This is unique. Many times SBA lending and relief packages that are tailored to small business leave out nonprofit organizations. Notably and intentionally, the CARES Act did not. the CARES Act specifically was designed to preserve payroll or to bring people back on payroll. And as a significant employer, nonprofit organizations were deemed important enough to include. Lastly, but certainly not least, for one of the first times in US history, major stimulus funding was provided outside of the, in addition to and outside of unemployment-related benefits to include freelancers. And notably, the Paycheck Protection Program does allow self-employed, freelance, or gig economy workers to apply for and obtain relief through the program, and we'll touch on those specifics. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Francisca Pretorius, to take us through more of the details of the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL. Francisca?
Thanks, Jason. I hope everyone can hear me well. Welcome and thanks for joining us on this Monday morning. As Jason said, I am going to dig into the details. And the most important program and the bulk of the time we will spend today will be on this Paycheck Protection Program that was part of the CARES Act. And this is a fantastic loan program with potential forgiveness for small businesses and self-employed individuals. And as Jason mentioned earlier, the goal is truly to keep workers paid and employed. So the use of the funds and the forgiveness of the loan those two things are limited really to ensure that the loan funds are used for payroll, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail. So it's administered by the Small Business Administration, and they work with the Department of Treasury. And basically, for those of you who know a little bit more about SBA's loans, this is an extension of SBA's 7A loans. So in terms of availability of this loan program, as Jason mentioned, the federal government allocated a lot of money to this, $349 billion to be exact, to this program. And the loans are available through existing SBA certified lenders. The SBA is also working really hard to get more lenders to help with this, because I think at the moment there are something like 800 SBA certified lenders, which will probably not be enough. Importantly, loans are granted on a first come, first serve basis. So if you or your clients are thinking of applying for this loan, do it as soon as possible, because there is a funding cap on this. So applications for small businesses and sole proprietors, that opened on Friday, April 3rd, to a few hiccups, but it opened. And then independent contractors and self-employed individuals can start applying April 10th. So what we found last week was that certain banks were not willing to process loans starting last week Friday due to the lack of guidance from Treasury and the SBA. I did see on the SBA's website this weekend, they did publish more guidance. So hopefully some more of these SBA lenders get their process in order and allow for people to start applying for this loan. So in terms of the eligible borrowers, I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because I think this is a very important first step of this loan. As Jason mentioned earlier, self-employed individuals are included, sole proprietors and independent contractors. What's important is they have to provide adequate documentation to prove their work status. We do not have enough information about exactly what documentation will be required, but I think, just thinking for ourselves here, payroll tax filings, Form 1099 miscellaneous, income and expenses of sole proprietorship. Hopefully the SBA will provide more guidance on this. So for a business concern, it's really exciting. Jason and I work often with cooperatives. Co-ops are included in this, nonprofits, veterans organizations, tribal business concerns. And now for the nitty-gritty detail. They have to employ the greater of 500 or fewer employees. And if we look at employees, that's full-time or part-time. Or if applicable, the size standard and number of employees established by the SBA for a particular industry. Now, the SBA size standards make reference to the North American Industrial Classification System, the NAICS codes. And with these codes, they say you are a small business based on either the number of people you employ or on receipts. It depends on the industry. For example, iron and steel pipe and tube manufacturing industry, I just looked at it quickly this morning. If you have 1,000 employees in that industry, then you use the 1,000 number because that's what the ICS code on the SBA website says. However, other industries, as I said, they look at the receipts. So for example, the health industry, I think home care is like $16 million in receipts per year. And if it's less than that, then you are a small business. So go take a look at those codes as well before you determine whether you're a small business or not. Then the last bullet on the slide is about the number of employees of applicants for loans are considered together with their affiliates. Now, there's a definition of affiliates, and that's about control, the entity that controls the other entity. And over the weekend, the Treasury actually published more guidelines on this. On the control test, it looks at ownership, at stock options, convertible securities, management. So there's a lot of details. If you have some investors, VC investors, maybe there's a control issue that you need to look at that will determine whether you are a small business or not. Okay. So next slide. If we look at the loan amount, here you have to take the lesser of 10 million or, and I think this is where most of our clients or our own businesses will fall into, you take the average monthly payroll cost for the 1-year period ending on the date that the loan was made, and you multiply that by 2.5. So it's 2.5 months of payroll costs, basically, that's your loan amount. If you are a seasonal employer, there's a different calculation, and there you look at a 12-week period, and the Act gives some guidance on which 12-week period to look at for your calculation. And you add to that any disaster loan that you have taken out after January 31, and that has been refinanced into the Paycheck Protection Loan. And we'll get into that in a little more detail in a later slide. So for payroll costs, the calculation for a payroll cost, it's quite a few things that you can take into consideration. Firstly, for employers, and I'm splitting this into employers on the one hand, and then independent contractors and sole proprietors on the other. Employers can take into consideration compensation to employees whose principal place of residence is in the United States, so don't take into account employees who live in foreign countries. And you can take into account their salary, wages, commission, or similar compensation. There's no more guidance on what similar compensation can mean, but my belief is this is just a really broad definition for allowing any type of compensation to people on your payroll. Cash
Fran,
tip,
if I could interject, yes. It's unclear whether bonuses count. It's also a little unclear, but I think the practical consensus is that employees are to be defined as payroll-based employees, and therefore independent contractor fees are excluded from the payroll cost calculation because those individuals can apply for relief under the second component of the Act, and therefore employers cannot double dip by including them in payroll costs and then also paying those contractors and then having the contractors apply separately.
Exactly. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that was actually confirmed, and on Friday the Treasury published some rules on this, and they confirmed that you cannot add contractors to your definition of payroll costs for employers. So payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave is included, allowance for separation or dismissal. Anyway, you can read that all yourself. I think that all makes sense, the big picture of what payroll costs are for employers. And then for independent contractors and sole proprietors, wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment or similar compensation. So Jason and I believe that this would include owner's draw as well.
And I will say, having gone through this process, the documentation relating to each of these items is important. Banks are still doing their best to understand the documentation requirements. And so what we have been telling clients is to include not only profit and loss statements, but also primary documentation of all these payments. So either 941 evidence of payroll or actual stubs of payroll income, and also primary documentation of health insurance payments, payments for family leave, payments for 401k or other retirement benefits. you'll want to have primary reports from those services, and also evidence of the payments made on behalf of the employees.
Thanks, Jason. So certain things are excluded from payroll cost calculations. As I said earlier, any compensation of an employee's principal place of residence is outside of the US. Also, if you pay employees in excess of 100,000 per year, you can't add that on top. So you can go up to 100,000 and include that, but anything on top of that should be excluded. Federal employment taxes, as well as qualified sick and family leave wages, for which a credit is allowed under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. If we have time, we will tell you a little bit more about that credit later. And as Jason mentioned, independent contractors can apply for a PPP loan on their own, so do not count them in for purposes of the employer borrower's PPP loan calculation. So as I mentioned, there were some rules published by Treasury on Friday, and these rules provide step-by-step guidance on how to calculate, and they provide some examples as well. We have a link to that in our blog, and you can just go onto Treasury's website to take a look at that, but that's helpful, and they provide different scenarios of where employees earn more than 100,000, what the calculation looks like, and so on. So if you have any further questions about that, take a look at Treasury's website. Okay, so use of the funds. Most importantly is payroll, and you'll see the bullet at the bottom. At least 75% of the PPP loan proceeds must be used for payroll costs. This is a new rule. This is not stipulated in the Act. And the rules that were published on Friday actually make this very clear. You have to use 75% of the loan for payroll costs. You can also use the loan money for mortgage interest payments, rent payments, utility payments, and interest on debt obligations that you incurred before February 15th. And then there's a little portion about refinancing of the EIDL loan. We will get into that in a little bit. Other terms that are important to mention is the interest rate is 1%. The Act said 4%. This was changed on Friday. The maturity is 2 years, not 10 years, as the Act says. No collateral and no personal guarantees required, which is fantastic. The principal and interest payments are deferred for 6 months, but note that interest will accrue during this time. E-signatures and e-consents are allowed, and I think that's been helpful for many of the lenders. Then also the standard loan fees imposed by the Small Business Act are waived. And then the Small Business Association and the Small Business Act requires for most of its loans that you have to prove that you are unable to obtain credit elsewhere. However, this does not apply for the PPP loan. And then the last bullet, you may only apply and receive one loan. So we would suggest that you apply for the maximum amount. One of the questions that popped up for me was, what do you do if you're, you pay yourself, but then you also have your employees? Can you, then do the payroll calculation costs for your business and all your employees, but you're not on payroll, you take an owner's draw. Can you then apply twice? We don't have an answer for that. So that's something that's still in the air. Hopefully there will be more guidance. Okay, so let's jump into the loan forgiveness, and I make a big star next to the word forgiveness because additional SBA guidelines or Treasury guidelines are expected. Everything is not 100% clear on the loan forgiveness, but what we know is that a portion of your PPP loan may be forgiven upon application. So you have to apply for forgiveness by the borrower to the lender. And the amount of loan forgiveness can be up to the full principal amount of the loan, as well as any accrued interest, with a big proviso. The borrower uses the loan proceeds for forgivable purposes, and employee and compensation levels are maintained. So the business must use it for payroll costs up to 75%, and employee and compensation levels must be maintained. So that means if you laid off people, you need to re-employ them and pay them from the Paycheck Protection Program loan, or if you lessen their hours, you have to get their hours back up to pre-COVID levels in order to get that forgiveness.
One thing that's not clear here, and Frank, correct me if you've seen guidance otherwise, nothing seems to prevent an employer from using the loan proceeds to make additional hires.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to the contrary.
And might that use of funds qualify for forgiveness if it's still used for payroll-related expenses?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Hopefully, as I said, the loan forgiveness is still a little murky. Hopefully, we'll get more guidance on that. Okay, so tips for applying. Review the final application form. And I say here final application form because there was an interim application form floating around last week, and it changed a bit. So the final one was published on, I think, Thursday. And gather the necessary materials. As Jason mentioned, lots of documentation that you need to keep track of. We still don't have guidance on that, but use your common sense about what kind of information you think the lender will require. We would suggest that you contact your accountant and or your bank that pays out payroll and ask your lender if it is authorized to process the PPP loan. If you have an existing relationship, this will make the process much easier. Go to that lender. If you are unfortunately not connected to an authorized lender, the SBA website has a search engine for you to look at lenders that are close to you, but I don't think there's any requirement that it has to be a lender in your area. Jason, have you seen anything to the contrary? I think you can have a lender, any SBA lender.
But I think the process will be much faster if you work with a local lender, but I can't say why or understand, but I do know that having an existing relationship will vastly simplify things. And every bank is dealing with a limited number of loan officers. Many are working over the weekend and around the clock and are processing on the basis of first come, first serve. So I do think all of those intangibles will matter when it comes to loan processing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we picked up on the loan application form, there's a section that requires information about applicant ownership. Asks about information of each owner of the business, but it only allows up to 2 owners to include their information. So if your business has 2 or less owners, no problem, you just provide that information. But if you have more than 2 owners, we would suggest that you add additional documentation. As I mentioned, we work with cooperatives on a daily basis, and cooperatives often have more than 2 owners. So when you apply, you will have an option to upload documents to support your application. And the SBA recommends that you submit an addendum that explains the ownership structure of your company and documentation authorizing the person filing the application on behalf of the business. And we would also suggest that you keep a resolution from the board on file that documents that the filer is authorized to apply for the loan and that the owners approved the application.
One thing I will mention, most banks are either are building portals for this. Even if they're 7(a) lenders, they're building new portals, and the banks are paving the runway as they're flying down it. So we're advising clients to be forgiving and understanding that the banks are working, with all due haste, and so it helps tremendously for everyone to assemble the documentation early and in one folder so that everything is available. I just know from the bank we use that the system they adopted was a DocuSign that had all of the supporting documentation uploaded and appended to that DocuSign. Many banks are prohibiting, I don't know if this is Treasury related or if this is bank policy, but they're prohibiting applications to be made by email submission. So it has to be done through the bank's portal. And as a result, the documents are being uploaded into a system, sometimes by DocuSign, sometimes by a proprietary portal. And so that can be a little difficult, but it helps to have all the documentation saved in PDF available in one place.
Thanks, Jason. So on that note, we have some more tips for not just loan application, but for loan use as well. We would suggest once the loan is approved that you deposit the funds into a separate business account to keep track of this. Keep meticulous records of all the debits from the account and store all your records and documents in one folder, as Jason suggested. Another idea is to notify your payroll processor and anyone else making these payments under the BBB loan to use this new account, this new separate business account. Review your account statements each month, make sure that 75% goes to payroll, and check that you only use it for the allowable uses, and check back with the bank regarding the forgiveness application process. As I said, we are expecting more information on the forgiveness application. I think banks are asking a lot of questions to Treasury and the SBA at the moment to figure out how to manage this whole process. So check back with them often. And to that, to that end too, it's really great if you have an existing lender that you have a relationship with and a direct communication channel to just stay on top of things. Okay, so that was the Paycheck Protection Program. And then another loan that is provided is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And then there's an additional little sweetness added to it. There's a grant. So the EIDL can provide up to $2 million of financial assistance to small businesses. And this is due to economic or declared disaster. And it's regardless of whether the applicant sustained physical damage. So the CARES Act expanded eligibility to include nonprofits and co-ops, and it waives personal guarantees or on loans under $200,000. And it also, like the PPP loan, it waives this unable to obtain credit elsewhere requirement. What's really nice about this EIDL loan, there's a grant added to it. So what's important about this is once you apply for an EIDL loan, you have to opt in to choose, right? Makes sense to opt in, I don't know why you wouldn't, but to choose to receive this grant. So it would provide you with immediate grant funding, meaning you don't need to pay it back upon application once your eligibility has been verified. Big difference between the PPP loan and the EIDL is that the EIDL is not forgivable. So there's, except for this grant portion that you would get, but the total loan amount is not forgivable, but it's a little more flexible in its uses than the PPP loan. So EIDL and PPP loan interaction. So if your business received an EIDL loan between January and April, you may still apply for a PPP loan. That does not exclude you are still eligible to apply. If you used the loan money, the EIDL loan money, for things other than payroll costs, then you're in good shape. But if you did use it for payroll costs, the EIDL loan, then your PPP loan must be used to refinance your EIDL loan. Proceeds from any advance up to $10,000 on the EIDL loan will be deducted from the loan forgiveness amount on your PPP loan. So there's a little bit of overlap here, but hopefully EIDL will provide you a little more flexibility in terms of loan use, and the PPP loan is really just to keep workers employed and should be focused on payroll costs. So the SBA provides a lot of other relief as well. I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but there's a lot of information on their website. So there's an express loan, and this express loan, you can access up to $25,000 with less paperwork. And what's important about this, you need to have an existing business relationship with the SBA lender. So that might not be available for everyone. Then there's the Community Advantage Loan Program, and this is up to $250,000 for small businesses in underserved markets. There's also a microloan program, maximum loan amount of $50,000 with the average loan size of $14,000. The 504 loan program is designed to foster economic development and job creation or retention, but it's very limited to the acquisition or eligible refinance of fixed assets. And then the last bullet, which is really nice debt relief that the SBA is providing. the SBA will automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of all current 7A loans for a period of 6 months, and then obviously, as I said, with the PPP loan, they will automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of new 7A loans issued prior to September 27th. So just go onto the SBA website. There is a wealth of information on all these other relief options. Okay, so let's move into taxes. So the CARES Act is providing payroll tax relief for employers as well as self-employed individuals. Employers can delay paying all their payroll taxes for 2020, and then half of that will be payable in 2021, and the other half in 2022. Self-employed individuals may also defer payment, but they can only defer 50% of their payroll taxes. So 25% of that will be payable next year and 25% in 2022. What's really important here is that this deferral is not available to any business that actually receives the PPP loan that was forgiven. So if you apply for the loan and then, a portion or the entire loan was forgiven, you cannot delay paying your payroll taxes. If you apply for the PPP loan and you do not get any forgiveness, then you can delay paying payroll taxes.
And one comment here, if a business elects the payroll tax relief as opposed to PPP loan forgiveness, this may go without saying, but it's obviously very important to notify the business's accounting staff and their accounting resources to cease making those payroll tax payments. So good communication across company departments and divisions will be critical.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Okay. Another tax relief is employee retention refundable payroll tax credit. So this is for any employer, including nonprofits, if their business has been fully or partially closed as a result of coronavirus or they have seen at least a 50% drop in quarterly gross receipts as compared to 2019. Then they are eligible to claim a refundable payroll tax credit for up to 50% of the qualified wages. Now, this is not available if the business receives a PPP loan. So this is not about forgiveness. If you receive a PPP loan, then you do not qualify for this employee retention refundable payroll tax credit. Okay. So net operating loss modification. So the CARES Act provides businesses and business owners with the opportunity to increase cash flow and liquidity by temporarily amending the net operating loss provisions. So businesses who incur a net operating loss in tax years 2018, 2019, or 2020 can carry back the losses for up to 5 years. There was also a limitation on only being able to offset 80% of taxable income, and that has been removed. So for tax years 2019 and 2020, businesses can utilize this net operating loss modification in prior years to offset 100% of taxable income.
So I'm going to cover some specific relief and support that's specific to Colorado. And these were taken directly from the Colorado Small Business Development Corporation, the SBDC website. As you know, the governor has assembled a task force, a COVID-19 related task force, pulling in all the agencies that report Department of Public Health, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, DORA, the Secretary of State, et cetera. And I'll just go through some of the top line. The details you'll have to go to the SBDC's website to obtain. And these are in chronological order, so these will track as you can appreciate the developments as they were taking place. March 20th, an executive order limiting evictions, foreclosures, and public utility disconnections provided vital relief to individuals who were directly affected and who faced the most direct forms of economic distress. The Banking and Finance Services Agency was involved to provide some guidance. March 23rd, this is the part of the executive order limiting the employers to reduce workforce by 50%, and note that there were exemptions made for financial institutions. March 27th, guidance on appraisals. I believe this is for real estate appraisals. As many of you are aware, March 30th, the Secretary of State's office enacted interim rules relating remote or electronic notarization. These are emergency rules that took effect pretty quickly after they were issued. And there are some additional resources available through the Colorado Assistance Fund for nonprofit organizations. So the state is doing its part to provide specific relief, but I also encourage folks to go to the Colorado SBDC's website for up-to-the-minute information on resources available here in the state. One thing that I'll reiterate, that while the PPP and the EIDL loan programs are SBA administered programs, part of the PPP, part of the CARES Act was a mandate for the SBA to increase the size of the preferred lending program. So I believe it was originally 1,800 banks participated. There's a charge to increase the number of lenders that are participating in the program, including community banks and credit unions. So it's important to check the specific banks of that your clients work with to understand whether they are participating and on what timetable. Fran, back to you. We're going to just finish up with just some brief introductory information about employer obligations under for paid sick and family leave. This came out under, as I said, the second stimulus bill, but nevertheless still poses new obligations and benefits, important benefits for employees.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Can you actually go to the next slide? I would actually quickly like to explain what the paid sick leave looks like, and then I'll talk about the tax. Thanks. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act requires employers to provide certain employees with paid sick leave or expanded family and medical leave for very specific COVID-19 related reasons. And these provisions will apply from April 1st through December 31st of this year. So first, the paid sick leave, employers with fewer than 500 employees have to provide full-time and part-time employees, regardless of how long they have worked for that employer, with paid sick time off. So for your full-time salaried employees, they can get to up to 80 hours of paid leave. And for your part-time or hourly employees, it's really a calculation of how much they work on average over a 2-week period. So there are 6 reasons that an employee is allowed to take this emergency paid sick leave. And the first 3 reasons really relate to the employee themselves. And the last 3 reasons is about caring for others who are sick or may be sick or is at home because of COVID-related reasons. So the first 3 reasons is about quarantine or self-isolation because they are sick, or they have received advice from healthcare providers to self-quarantine due to COVID-related concerns, or they are experiencing some symptoms of COVID and they are seeking diagnosis. So if an employee takes this type of leave, then they need to get their regular rate of pay and up to a maximum of $511 per day, or $5,110 in aggregate. That's over that 80-hour period of paid leave. Or if it's reasons 4, 5, and 6, they care for someone subject to a quarantine order or advice that they have to stay home. Point number 5, they're caring for a child at home since school is closed. Or point number 6, any other substantially similar conditions. If 4, 5, or 6 are applicable, then you can pay them 2/3 of their regular rate, up to $200 per day, or $2,000 in aggregate for those 80 hours. So moving on to the family leave, here it's for a single reason, and that single reason is that the employee is unable to work or telework as a result of COVID-19 only due to the need to take care of a child under 18 because their school or their place of care has been closed. So that links back, and I made a little arrow there to point number 5 under emergency paid sick leave. And I did that to explain that you'll see under the benefits for employees, it's a total of 12 work weeks. But the first 10 days are unpaid. So those first 10 days will probably be emergency paid sick leave first. And then those employees who cannot work from home or need to be at home to take care of their children, they will move into the emergency family leave section. And then that is 2/3 of their regular pay.
And Fran, can vacation or accrued PTO be used for the first 10 days under the emergency family leave?
Yes, it can. Yes,
and can the employer require that?
No, employer can't require that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not digging into that too much because I know tomorrow there is a session about, I'm assuming the employment law update will cover this tomorrow. But what I do want to cover today is the tax credit for these types of sick leave and family medical leave. So employers who pay this emergency paid sick leave or emergency family medical leave, they are entitled to refundable tax credits for the qualified leave wages. So they can claim these credits on their federal employment tax returns, or they can just reduce their federal employment tax deposit. Self-employed people are also entitled to similar credits. Very important, retain adequate records and documentation related to this leave. Okay, so I'm just going to mention a few other tax benefits and not dig into it, but there is a wealth of information actually on the IRS website about these tax benefits. So non-taxed employer payment of employee student loans is offered during this time, changes to the alternative minimum tax credit refunds, changes to limitations on deductibility of business interest expenses, as well as changes to depreciation for qualified improvements on property. These are all tax benefits that small businesses can get during this COVID-19 emergency time. So we have 15 minutes left for some questions. I'm not sure how we want to manage this.
We're going to turn everyone's video back on, or everyone can turn their video back on. Remember that this is being recorded, and so your questions and your video will be recorded. Any public chat questions will also be in the recording. And I believe you'll be able to unmute yourself, or if you raise your hand in the chat box, you'll be able to be unmuted. There's a question, can we get a copy of the slides? Yes, absolutely. Kyle, after this presentation, will send a copy of the slides as well as the CLE form, and a link to the Zoom, I believe, will be made available as well for you to review or for circulation. So with that, we have 15 minutes for questions. Again, you can just unmute yourself, or if things are boisterous, we can just have people raise hands in the chat. All right, I see a question came in. I will read it. I am a sole practitioner with no employees as an LLC. This person is a contingency fee lawyer. I do not yet know how income will be affected this year, but given court closures, one already knows that they will be affected. The firm is an LLC with pass-through income and subject to self-employment tax. The firm pays certain health-related benefits as an individual, not a group plan. Thanks for any thoughts. Of course, we can't give any tax or legal advice directly or on this call, but I will say that this strikes me as one, to make an application as a self-employed individual. An LLC that's taxed as a pass-through entity is regarded as a disregarded entity, and therefore that individual should probably apply under the self-employment PPP program, which opens up April 10th. As to whether individual health premiums are included or may be included in the PPP loan payroll costs, that I don't know, and I don't know if we have guidance on it. I believe the guidance refers to employer plans, and so those would be employer costs. So I don't know if that would include individual costs, but again, as an individual, it is possible that guidance will come out to provide us with greater certainty around what sort of costs may be included in a self-employed individual's quote unquote payroll costs. So I would check back on the SBA website for additional guidance. I'll read this next question. How long does it take on average to get the money after you submit an application in good order? That is a great question. I don't believe we know. I don't know that any of the funds, I of course can't know this, but I don't know that any of the funds have actually been dispersed yet. My understanding is that many banks opened up their loan applications on Friday. Many loan officers were working through the weekend. I submitted our loan application Sunday night. So the next step is ordinarily for a loan officer to review the file, contact the applicant, fill in any information. Of course, lenders are going through this process for the first time. Lenders have been given limited liability protection in reliance on the minimal level of documentation required. And so lenders are just working their way through things. It's hard to say when the monies will start to flow. Bear in mind that the individual payments from Treasury to individuals and families are to be made this week. So by direct deposit, all of the payments up to $1,200 per person or $500 per child, those will be coming starting this week, I believe. But it's hard to say what will be coming through the PPP program. Here's another question. Client is a construction contractor. If he applies for loan for employees but can't find new work right away after things open up, how does forgiveness work?
So I can jump into that. So the PPP loan allows for, as I said, 2.5 months basically of payroll costs. And the purpose is to keep the workers employed. So whether you get work in or not, if you pay your workers, then that amount will be forgiven. And it's over an 8-week period that ends June 30, 2020. So if after June 2020, you don't get more clients to do construction work, then I mean, that is unfortunately the business's problem, but the 8-week period that you pay your workers, that part will be forgiven regardless if you get contracts in to do work. I hope that answers.
I presume that if workers are furloughed or laid off after that date, after the benefit of the PPP loan has been received, the unemployment benefits will then be able to accrue for the employees who are furloughed
Yes.
and laid off. So there are expanded unemployment benefits. Call back in tomorrow for those details. Here's another question. With the interaction between the PPP loan and the EIDL, what if you applied for an EIDL loan before April 3rd but have not yet received the loan?
That's a great question. Can I come back to that one? I just quickly want to take a look at something.
Sure. We will come back to that one. Here's another question in the meantime. Client is a nonprofit organization. Are they required to provide paid sick leave even if that benefit was not available to the employees before COVID? I will have to refer back to the slides. I believe that even if this benefit was not available to employees before COVID, the paid sick leave benefit is now a requirement subject to a potential application for exclusion. The rules that came out under the Family First Act allow the Department of Treasury to issue rules relating to exempting certain employers. Those rules have not yet come out, and it is subject to application. So we don't know what that process looks like. We don't know what the standard is, but the sick leave benefit is now required even if the benefit was not provided before COVID. I'll take this next question, Fran, while you're looking into this. And again, bear in mind, we're trying to answer these questions and internalize some of this guidance in real time as it comes out. Here's another question. Does the contractor get debt forgiveness if he doesn't have work after June 30th? Where can this person get more information on expanded unemployment benefits. You can get information on expanded unemployment benefits, again, through the COVID-19 task force and the SBDC website. They will take you directly to the state's unemployment application portal, where there's a wealth of information. If the contractor gets loan forgiveness but doesn't have work after June 30th, again, the employer may furlough or lay off workers at that point and will not have to pay back the loan forgiveness. The loan forgiveness, the look back window is 8 weeks following the grant. I think it's the loan being approved. Mm-hmm. And so the 8 weeks then commence, and the 8-week period that ends is when the eligibility for forgiveness is reviewed. If after that point the employer furloughs or lays workers off, the forgiveness has already been approved. Those loan funds will not then be subject to clawback. We don't believe. I don't think that's contemplated. And again, those workers can receive the benefit of unemployment.
Yeah, I agree. I can jump back to the question about the interaction between the PPP and EIDL. What if you applied for an EIDL loan before April 3rd, but you haven't received it? So for the EIDL and PPP interaction, it's important that you have actually received it between January 31 and April 3rd. So if you haven't received it yet, I'd say you can still apply for the PPP loan. Yeah.
And you can definitely apply for both, and you can even accept both so long as there is no overlapping use of funds. But there's also no obligation to take the loan, even if you're approved. So you can be approved for a loan amount and take less or none of the approved amount. Are there any other questions?
I just want to add something to the paid sick leave question, the nonprofit paid sick leave. Are they required to provide paid sick leave even if that benefit wasn't available to the employee before COVID? So this is the emergency paid sick leave only kicked in on April 1st, and it's only until December 31st. Before that, the normal rules of paid sick leave applies, or for sick leave applies. So just take a look at normal paid sick leave rules before that, and you are only required to provide paid sick leave from April 1st to December 31st for those very specific COVID reasons, and then you can get a tax credit for that.
And Frank, can you talk a little bit about stacking, how ordinary sick leave may be stacked alongside paid sick leave or family leave?
I mean, it's truly the employee's choice. The employer cannot force an employee to take a different kind of leave if they don't have to. And the employee has the right to take this emergency paid sick leave from April 1st to the end of the year. Does that answer the question, Jason?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have 5 more minutes.
I also want to add about expanded unemployment benefits. We have a lot of information on our blog as well, and we update that very often. So you can go take a look at that for unemployment benefits state by state.
Great. And here's a question. If an owner of a law firm is 100% owner of an unrelated business, i.e. a non-law related business, is the non-law related company an affiliate? So Fran, I think that implicates the control test, and I'm not sure whether law or non-law related is material here. I think it would go back to the control test.
Yeah, it would just probably be back to the control. I mean, which company is applying for the loan here? I think that could also make a difference.
I think
the law firm.
It's not clear in the question, but it says the owner of the law firm owns a non-law related entity. So the law firm doesn't own it. It's the owner of the law firm owns a separate legal entity. So that might be a specific enough question to go back and look at the rules specific to that circumstance.
Yeah, I've linked the affiliate rules in our blog as well to look at and as I said, it was published over the weekend, so I have not digested it fully yet. Sorry.
No, that's great. Again, the link to our website, I'll put it again in the chat, is Any last questions? I'll close by saying we've been hearing reports of businesses that are opting out or opting to apply for less than they would otherwise be entitled. This is not a political statement. We are encouraging all businesses that are eligible for any of the relief or loan programs to apply for the maximum extent for which they are eligible. They can choose to take a lesser amount or none of the available benefit, but we are encouraging every eligible applicant to apply. Here's one last question. If applied for EIDL in advance of April 1st, do I have to reapply?
No, don't reapply. I think that would really mess up the SBA system at the moment. They are overwhelmed, and I've read multiple things that don't reapply, just apply once. Same goes for the PPP loan, just apply once.
And I will reiterate, the Treasury updated the PPP application form. The V3 that came out on Friday afternoon is the most current. It's the one that's linked on their website, but it is different, and no bank will accept an application under the V2. So remember to go and use the most current version of the form. All right, well, if there are no final questions, Kyle, Laura, we will happily turn it over to you if you want to plug the rest of the week's schedule. But thank you very much for attending today's discussion. I hope this was valuable. We invite your feedback and your questions. Here are our email addresses. Again, feel free to visit our blog for up-to-date information. We hope that this helps you advise your clients and be better informed about the benefits that are available to you or to your clients or to the business community. But thank you very much for logging in Monday morning.
And this is Kyle Myers. I'd just like to thank Jason and Francisca again for logging in and presenting, everyone for joining us. The Boulder e-brief for this week will be sent out shortly, and then has the schedule for the next 2 weeks of our virtual CLEs. You can also view those on our website. We do ask that you register just so that we can send the Zoom information, and we're going to have these be password protected moving forward, just to protect, since Zoom is undergoing some madness lately, if you see in the news. Laura and I are available if you have any questions, and I will get the PowerPoint slides and the CLE form for you guys to apply for CLE sent out shortly here this morning. And this presentation will be put up as a video link on our website if you happen to miss the beginning or anything, and then that'll be up by tomorrow morning, or excuse me, tomorrow afternoon at the latest. So again, thank you, Jason and Francisca, and if no one has any further questions, I'll bid you all a good morning, and hopefully we'll see you at some of our CLEs the rest of this week and next week as well. And stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.